I thank you all for joining us tonight for our preservation and placemaking event. We have a really great lineup for you. We have Cheryl Morgan, who is here to give us a presentation, and it'll be followed by a panel discussion led by some of Huntsville's brightest, and I will introduce them when we get to the panel discussion. So I'm going to give a bio on Ms. Morgan here. Ms. Cheryl is a licensed architect and emerita professor of architecture in the School of Architecture, Planning, and Landscape Architecture at Auburn University. In 30 years of teaching, she worked with architectural programs in Georgia Institute of Technology, Oklahoma State and California College of Arts and Crafts. For the last 12 years, her teaching career was, she was the director of Auburn's Urban Studio in Birmingham, Alabama. Under Cheryl's leadership, the Urban Studio's Small Town Design Initiative program worked with over 75 small towns and neighborhoods in Alabama. Morgan practiced architecture and urban design in San Francisco Bay Area. She worked with a number of firms, including Environmental Planning and Research, Gensler, and the Grusin Partnership. Before coming to Auburn in 1992, she was associate with the Berkeley firm of ELS and Elzebin and Logan. Morgan's professional practice now focuses on urban design, community revitalization, and graphic design. She is also an experienced facilitator. Cheryl holds 2 degrees from Auburn University, a bachelor's in architecture and a bachelor's of arts in sociology. Her master's is, she has a master's of architecture, and it's from the University of Illinois. She is certified by the National Council of Architectural Registration Boards and is a member and a fellow of the American Institute of Architects. In 2007, she was named a Woman of Distinction by the Cahaba Council of the Girl Scouts, and in 2010 received the Thomas Jefferson Award from the Jefferson County Historical Commission, as well as being named to a Woman of Distinction Leadership Award by Auburn's Women's Resource Center. In 2011, she was presented with the Alabama chapter of American Planning Association's Distinguished Leadership Award, recognizing her as a friend of planning. In 2012, she received one of Auburn University's highest awards for achievement in outreach. She is a member of the Rotary Club of Birmingham that honored her in 2016 with the Spain Hickman Service Award. So I'd like to welcome Cheryl Morgan to the stage, and we're really, truly honored to have you here this evening. Thank you, Cheryl.
Oh, thank you. It is a real pleasure to be here with you tonight. I have to tell you, I brag about Huntsville all the time. You are really one of our state's great assets. So thank you. Thank you not only for inviting me, but thank you for all that you do to make us proud. It's also a pleasure to be part of a program that celebrates preservation and the potential that preservation gives us to make good places for people to live, work, and play. Because we know that quality of life is often about place. And it's a factor that is really central to decision making for many people when they think about where are we going to live. In fact, a strong town study this year confirmed that 56% of millennials and 46% of boomers, that's me, prefer to live in walkable, mixed-use neighborhoods. And with preservation, we have those assets built in, so to speak. So place matters. Saving places is good for the community, it's good for the economy, and it's good for the environment. I love the campaign that the National Preservation Group has right now, This Place Matters. It's catchy and fun and to the point. And that's what a good campaign does. But I must tell you, and I got this slide off their website, there must be something I'm missing in this photo, because I don't really see what's there yet anyway that matters, particularly compared to, yes, this place, your place, the legacy that was left by your forefathers. It makes it easy to see this place matters. Your preservation history is impressive with your 4 districts, with your attention to saving special places. And I'm sure, though, that you have places that are lost places, cases that you can look to where you saved the building but lost the place. So I'd like to talk to you about the importance of placemaking, the importance of preservation, and how those go together, and how important it is not just to save the building, but to save the place. Places are the context for our buildings, those sacred and important buildings. That's not to say that saving buildings, particularly those that are related to our shared sense of history, our shared sense of identity, is not important. Of course it is. But let me give you 2 examples that I hope will illustrate my point. This is Salem Church, and I know some of you have been in Ed McMahon, our Alabama native, who does a great job with presentations. And so I'm using this example for some of the same reasons he does, because of course it's an important historic building. It was a significant field hospital in Virginia during the Chancellorsville campaign. But the reason I include it is because, as an Auburn graduate and as an Auburn emerita professor, this is where the War Eagle was rescued and adopted. So for all of you Auburnites out there, this is where it started, War Eagle. Did I hear War Eagle? Yes. But this is a classic example. They've lovingly saved this building, but they failed to save the place. Indeed. So there's the church. There's where it sits in this sea of strip centers. And sadly, of course, there were probably other places that income generating, sales tax generating strip center could have been. And we could have saved the building and the place. That's harder, but it's important. Now I'm going to show you an example from my hometown. Actually, it's not a town, it's a crossroads. This is Lost Mountain, Georgia. Or the general store. Next to the general store was the church where I grew up, and that was it. But this was the place where we found community. You'd run into your neighbors as you stopped for a loaf of bread or Mr. Newt's very special sweet potatoes. And you would literally find people on the porch chewing tobacco and chewing the fat. You'd also perhaps find someone with an RC and a moon pie. That was the kind of place Newt's store was. So they have saved it, beautifully restored. It's now a community bank. What better use than something that's based in the community? Restored it right down to the gas tanks, but I think you know where this is going. They saved the building and lost the place. So there's the store, the mountains up behind this. And of course my mother loves that there's a Publix at the top of the hill. But it makes me want to cry. Because, of course, we'll never get it back. Lost Mountain is now truly lost. Place matters. Sometimes, though, saving one building can make a huge difference. This Taco Bell in Colorado is a place where they had proposed putting a standard strip center model on the site of a historic Spanish-style house. So the design review and the planning commission said no. Threats, fights, but they capitulated. They restored the home as their Taco Bell, and now, of course, it's their highest grossing Taco Bell, and it's also the subject of many of their annual reports. So people are looking for authentic experiences. So while the food isn't authentic, the experience can be in this Taco Bell. Closer to home, this is the Chick-fil-A that was proposed for one of the most important historic districts in Birmingham, our Five Points district. I know many of you have been there. And it was going to go right behind Frank Stitt's Highland Bar and Grill. Now, this is a place where food is authentic. In fact, it's some of the best in the country. You know that I think Frank and his team were in Chicago for the 9th time as one of the top finalists, the top 5 finalists for Restaurant of the Year for the whole country. But rightfully, that strip center Chick-fil-A was not going to be good for business. So, design review, and thank you for having a design review here. It's such an important part of maintaining your historic integrity. Design review said no. Well, we were threatened with suits, all kinds of appeals, and on appeal, we finally won and got a win that really proved to have multiple benefits. So this is the building that existed on that site, on the corner where they wanted to put it. Now, this was not a historic building, but it was an existing building, and it represented embedded energy, and it represented something that had been invested in the community. Well, what Chick-fil-A ended up doing was they hired a local architect who kept that building, pulled new structure to the street, which is, of course, where the front of a business should be in a historic, walkable neighborhood, particularly a commercial district. And then if we look at the next slide, you'll see it in context. So there's the tower of the Methodist Church, and Highland Bar and Grill and Fonfon are right across the street. So we got a new addition to the neighborhood that's not historic, but is in good dialogue with the historic context of that district. And then here's the really sweet part. Not only did they hire a local architect who cared about this place because it was their place, their part of their shared memories and their shared sense of place, they hired that same architect for 12 more Chick-fil-A's in other sensitive contexts. So we got a better building, and one of our own got commissioned for some quite good work. But I also want to tell you what turned the case. The planning commissioner member who sat on that appeals panel wrote that buildings in historic neighborhood commercial environments should be able to have multiple lives without the branding of the initial occupant. That is, they should be available for adaptive reuse. This is a placemaking concept, and is a concept that acknowledges one of the great attributes of many buildings worth preserving. They were built well, with quality materials, and with straightforward footprints that are easily adapted to new uses and can continue to be contributing in every sense for generations. Good buildings, well built, have multiple lives and multiple opportunities to help make place. Place does matter. Another example of saving a building that is about place retaining and also about community building is in Valley, Alabama. Valley is a collection of historic mill company towns. It's on the Chattahoochee River, right on the Georgia-Alabama line on the I-85 corridor. They had a very rich sense of place in these mill villages, in these mill towns. The families of the mill town worked together, they played together, they worshiped together, they studied together. When the mills closed, that sense of community stayed, and they were tied even more tightly to the institutions like their schools that were part of that sense of community. This is Lafayette Lanier School in Valley, and the school board was struggling because they needed to manage cost. Well, what school board doesn't? They particularly needed to get a handle on their utility bills. So they were gonna, this is a familiar one, take the windows out and replace them with non-historic windows. Well, the community got really upset about that because these were really special windows. These are austral windows, which are kind of industrial sash that sweeps up and past each other. They're really, we do make them still, but they're not standard like they were at the generation of this school. So the community got together and they decided, let's do an energy audit. And they paid for it. And when the energy audit came back, it turned out the reason that the utility bills were high is because, of course, the windows had been painted and painted and painted, and they weren't closing correctly. So the decision was made, let's clean up the windows and see what happens. Well, when the windows were cleaned up, properly painted, restored to their original functional closure, the utility bills came down. And, this is the sweet part, by restoring the windows, they saved significant amounts of money over replacing with new windows that would not have been historically accurate. So, the town saved the building that was the one that had been left to them by their forefathers. And they found a new power in the community in working together to save that building. And the result of that was not only their understanding that this sense of identity was shared and was a common denominator in the community, but also helped them establish a historic commission. And now all 4 of those original mill villages are on the National Register. So, place matters. So what are the attributes of place? There are many, of course, and you would probably have your own list, but the bottom line is that we recognize place. And we also know when there is placelessness. We recognize authentic. And of course, that's where we want to spend time with our friends, our families, with our neighbors, where we want to walk our dogs, where we want to run in to each other, where we spend time, we spend money. Whether it's those millennials or these mobile retired folks that we see here, they are looking for place. And I should say, what we know in Alabama is that a mobile retired couple has the spending equivalent of 3 factory workers in your local economy. And we're learning what the spending power of millennials are. Place matters. So, I want to challenge you not only to consider how we preserve places, but also about our responsibility to create places that will be worth preserving 50 years from now. I'm going to start in Double Springs. Of course, this is down the road. It's in Winston County, the free state of Winston during the Civil War. Their courthouse is really humble by Alabama standards, but it sits on the highest point of the highest ridge in this part of Appalachia. And with its native limestone and its dignified design, it makes it clear that this building represents the values of its builders. They thought it was important to find that highest point and to invest in a place where the community comes together, coming together to engage and create the rules of living together, the civic of our communities. The clock on the cupola there signifies a respect for the value of our citizens, their citizens' time and commitment to each other and community. But let's look across the street. There's Town Hall. In the words of the South, it's pitiful. Now, they know I say that about them, so some of you may be Double Springs natives. I apologize. But what I'm going to ask you is, I'm going to back up a slide. This building was built by my maybe great-great-grandparents' generation. This building was built by mine. Which do you think had more disposable capital? Their generation or my generation? Well, if we back up, what I can tell you is that that generation put their resources, that collective shared resources, and it really is about the same if you accommodate inflation and all kinds of other things. We put our infrastructure, ours into infrastructure. They went this way and we went that way. So, do you think anyone will want to preserve this town hall in 50 years? Or, if we look at the next slide, this senior center. And I won't tell you where this is. Particularly since this metal building, and I know it wasn't cheap, but it sure looks cheap, metal building is out on the edge of town behind the ball fields in a piece of land they owned, I'm sure. But it signals loud and clear to those seniors, we've put you out to pasture. That embodied knowledge and experience and commitment to community out behind the ball field. What were they thinking? Well, I'm sure economy, but it comes off the least we can do versus the most we can do. And certainly has nothing to do with building a legacy or something worth preserving 50 years from now. Because what we know is that, we look at the next slide, what we build, where we build, and how we build shows what we value. So I want to end with two examples from Birmingham that illustrate, I hope, not just the value in creating place, but that it's an attitude. An attitude we, and that's both public and private, we the citizens and we our elected officials, need to realize is about good economic development. The first is from our Avondale community, and I hope some of you have visited there because it is on fire with good things to eat, drink, and listen to, good music, good food, good beverage. It's a place now where even the abandoned service stations are being renovated for new eateries and breweries and bars. It started with a public investment in Avondale Park. And some of you may know this is where the zoo started in Birmingham, and that's why Avondale Brewery has an elephant mascot, because there was Miss Fancy, who was the favorite elephant in the zoo. But the buildings were very simple and humble CCC buildings from the Depression era. And a group of friends of Avondale Park raised awareness and helped raise some funds, get this on the radar of the city. And now, with their help and the city's help, the park has been beautifully restored. And one of the things that's fascinating is there was a spring there, that's where you see the lake, and it had been covered over by ball fields. And even the Little League team folks and the club sports people and all those agreed to go down one field less to get the springs opened up again so that it would be back to what it had been. And now it is a destination. So the first investors were, with the confidence that this public investment, this highly visible public investment, the first investments were breweries and bars. Now, what's amazing, of course, is that In the original law about breweries, they needed a historic building. And the main street that connected along 41st to the park was full of buildings with character, of historic buildings. So that original law was written that to open a brewery, it had to be in a historic building. Thank you, legislature. And it was a huge success, a huge win. And now Avondale is a destination. It's a place. And then our railroad park, a place in its own right, not just a lawn with trees, but our city, again with lots of grassroots and citizen support and fundraising, created a legacy park, more than it had to be, instead of the least that it could be. And its success has attracted the Barons back downtown and breweries, and then that win created the atmosphere and the state historic tax credits, built the confidence in a wave of restorations and adaptive reuse in our downtown, led by Pizitz, which has just opened, the Lyric, which you'll see next, which is gorgeous. I hope you'll come and see it, and the Florentine Building, among many, many others. And of course, there was also new construction. This one is on the edge of Railroad Park. It, along with a number of other restorations and new construction, are among the 1,100 housing units that are under construction now in downtown Birmingham. And altogether right now, we have $1 billion in investment in and around our downtown. $1 billion. It was spurred by placemaking, underpinned by so many amazing buildings that were available for restoration. The buildings left to us by our forefathers and foremothers. I watched this new building go up, so the next slide. It's not bad, but it was not built with enduring materials, so it probably won't last 50 years. And if it does, its design is not one that, sadly, I'll fight to preserve. What will be our legacy? It's important, because what we build, where we build, and how we build shows what we value. Place matters. This place matters. Your place matters. Thank you very much.